You may have been trying to choose a career based on the least useful thing about it, its name. Here's the question most of us ask. What career fits me? But fits what exactly? And judged by what? The question doesn't say, which means you can ask it forever. So here's a better one. What kind of work am I likely to feel satisfied doing? That one can actually be researched, because satisfaction can be measured. And most of us already have an answer ready. Follow your passion. We've heard it so often that it stopped sounding like a claim and started sounding like a fact. A team of researchers pulled together 105 studies covering close to 40,000 people. They wanted to know how much matching your interests to a job predicts whether you end up satisfied. Take a guess. Only around 4%. Now, as low as that sounds, it isn't nothing. Your interests still help predict what you choose, what you enjoy learning, and what you're willing to stay with. That's just different from how you feel on an ordinary working day. What seems to carry more weight is how the work actually runs, the tasks themselves, how much say you have, what kind of feedback and support you get. In a large review of work design, those things accounted for about 1/3 of the variation in job satisfaction. These aren't perfect head-to-head numbers, but the gap is hard to ignore, roughly 30% next to 4. That's why the interest logic we were handed was never going to be enough on its own. So we need something else to go on, and most of it is already available to you. Your own history and real information about real jobs. Let's start there. Think about choosing a place to live. You can study the price, the floor plan, and every photo in the listing. But none of that tells you that the upstairs neighbor walks around at 2 in the morning, or that traffic makes it impossible to sleep with the window open. If you only discovered that after moving in, you probably wouldn't think, how could I have been so stupid? You'd think, well, that wasn't in the listing. There was no way the noise was going to show up in a photograph. And job titles leave out information in exactly the same way. A title, a description, and a salary show you the job from the outside. They don't tell you what the day will feel like once you're inside it. This may explain why career research can feel so unsatisfying. You've been reading listing after listing, but the information you care about most was never on the page. So before we investigate a career, we need to know what we're hoping to find inside it. More simply, we need to know what matters to you. And the best place to begin is the work you've already experienced. So let's sort your past experience into 5 areas: tasks, skills, needs, environment, and practical limits. I'll put all 5 questions in the PDF, so you don't need to remember them now. Let's walk through them first. The first one is tasks. Think of a day when you were so absorbed in something that you forgot to eat or take a break, and only looked up when several hours had passed. Name the action rather than the subject. Were you explaining a difficult idea, organizing a messy project, solving a practical problem, designing something from scratch, or helping someone work through a challenge? The second one is skills. What do people usually ask you for help with? What have you spent your free time learning when you could have been scrolling on your phone? The third one is what you need from work. Choose the 3 needs that matter most. Maybe they're financial security, freedom in how you work, and the chance to help people. The fourth one is environment. Do you work better alone or with others? Do you prefer a clear plan or room to improvise? A personality test can offer some clues, but your most accurate answers will come from your own past experience. The last one is practical limits. Maybe you can't afford to go without an income while you retrain. Maybe you can't move right now, or you only have a few hours each week. So whatever you try next has to fit around those limits. That's one reason I often recommend keeping a record of your experiences on this channel. When you feel lost, those notes can give you useful clues from your own past. And with the technology we have now, saving them has become much easier. You may still look at these questions and have no idea how to answer them. So let's say you're a teacher. The job has been wearing you out, and you're considering instructional design, but you're torn because you still care about education. When you look back, you don't just write, "I like education." You notice that you love turning difficult ideas into clear lessons. People ask for your help with teaching materials, and you notice where students get lost. You need stable income, more time to think, and something finished to point to. since you need to keep earning, another 2-year degree is not the right first step. Once you put those answers together, you can ask a much more useful question. Would instructional design let you keep the parts of teaching you enjoy while giving you more time to think and less constant interaction? And now those 5 areas have a purpose. They give you something to compare the job against. As you learn more, you can see what seems to fit, what clearly doesn't, and what you still need to find out. And because you could keep researching a career forever, it's important to give yourself a deadline before you start. Until then, collect as much useful information as you can. But when that date comes, that's it. Stop taking in new information and focus on what you've already found. Start with the basics. Read real job postings, then check public databases such as ONET, the Occupational Outlook, Handbook, and Career One Stop. They can show you what people in the job usually do, which skills they use, and what the general work environment is like. As you find each piece of information, bring it back to your page. But even with all of that, you're still just getting a general picture of what the job looks like on average. That's why you also need to talk to people who have actually done the job. Ask what they spent most of last week doing, which part takes the most out of them, and how the work changes as they move up. And if you can, don't rely on one person's experience. Try talking to someone who just started, someone with experience, and someone who decided to leave. This kind of honest look at a job is sometimes called a realistic job preview. It helps people go in with more accurate expectations, which means fewer nasty surprises later. Most job ads won't give you that. Their job is to make you apply, so you'll have to find the missing information somewhere else. Those conversations start filling in the gaps. You may find that some instructional design roles are full of meetings and approvals, while others protect much more time for focused work. So now you're no longer judging instructional design as one big category. You're looking for a particular version of the job that fits the conditions on your page. And by this point, you may have found a few that look promising. But looking promising from the outside is still different from doing the work yourself. How will it affect your energy? And once the novelty wears off, would you still want to do it again? You can start to find out with one small but real piece of the work. Now, that doesn't have to mean finding a client or taking on another job. Start with whatever access you already have. You might take on a related task at your current job. You could use public material to make a small sample over the weekend. And if you have more time or support, you could try a volunteer project, a short course with a real assignment, or a temporary role. Whichever option is available to you, use it to answer the biggest question you still have about the work. So let's go back to our teacher example. What you still don't know is whether you'd enjoy designing self-guided lessons as much as teaching students in real time, and how the change might affect your energy. Take part of a lesson you normally teach in person and turn it into a short, self-guided lesson. Then let some students try it without you explaining it live, or ask another teacher to look it over. Before you start, write down 3 predictions. How well do you think you'll do? How much energy will it take? And would you want to make another one? Without those predictions, you'll have nothing to compare the experience against when you look back. Let's say you enjoy turning your explanation into something students can follow on their own. The feedback and revisions take some effort, but you still finish with more energy than you normally have after a day of live teaching. And you'd be willing to do it again. And that's how a small test can move you forward. In this case, if you enjoy the self-guided work, you know to look more closely at roles with less live facilitation. If you miss the interaction, you know to look at more blended roles. Your own test may reveal something completely different. But by the end, you should have a clearer idea of which version of that career is worth exploring next. Of course, some careers are much harder to try this way. You can't practice medicine or law for a weekend. But you may be able to shadow someone, take an introductory course, or try the kind of case exercise used in training. That won't show you the whole profession, but it can help you decide whether you want to investigate that path more seriously before taking on years of training. Now, maybe you're listening to all this and thinking, this sounds useful if you have several careers to choose from. But I need an income soon, and getting even one offer already feels hard enough. That's completely fair. In that situation, use the process a little differently. Let it help you decide which applications are worth your limited time. And there's another payoff here. Everything you've learned about the job could also make your application stronger. By the time you reach an interview, you'd already have a much clearer picture of how the work is actually done. Of course, none of that would guarantee an offer, because hiring would still depend on things outside your control. But you'd walk into the interview able to explain exactly why the role fits and show a real example of what you can do. So if you're still wondering how to know which career fits you, here's the process. Start by filling in those 5 areas from your own experience. Then bring every job you investigate back to that page. You'll begin to see which parts fit your conditions, which parts don't, and what still needs to be tested in real life. A job listing can only tell you so much. At some point, you have to find out what the work feels like for yourself. To help you do that, I've turned this process into a free PDF called the Career Reality Check. It includes the 5 questions, a career comparison page, and prompts for interviews and work samples. You can download it using the link in the description. And if you already know which direction you want to explore, but somehow you still can't get yourself moving, watch my video on self-sabotage next. It explains why that loop happens and how to interrupt it. You can click on it right here. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.